Hello, this is Karen Rainford. I'm here to talk to you about Chapter 3 of Project Management Jumpstart for MG408 at St. Mary's University. What should I study in Chapter 3? Chapter 3 is about the initiating processes. First, it's not a project, and then something happens, it gets authorized and ready to go ahead, and it is a project, and it is going forward. And we're going to cover that process and determine the key elements from it. The first part that Heldman talks about is how projects begin. They start as ideas, but there is a formal process to determine whether or not we should spend money on those and go forward. Projects start with needs and demands from the organization. There are definite reasons why projects should be done. And there's a listing of the kinds of things that generate projects, such as business needs, market demands, and several other parts. In terms of project requests, organizations are all different in terms of the level of formality, but a project request usually is like a feasibility study or some kind of a document that goes through and talks about what we hope to accomplish. Sometimes they're called a project concept document, and it outlines the objectives of the project and high-level goals. And it's used to figure out which project should go forward and which wouldn't, given that we only have limited sets of resources in any organization. In terms of how do we select which projects go forward, there are existing groups in organizations or people who make those kinds of decisions. Typically, that's not made by the project manager alone. And the way that those groups make decisions, the first part is a financial calculation, where there are different methods of calculating returns. I don't expect you to be able to calculate any of these returns, but do know that there are several different financial methods and be able to identify those. Scoring methods are used across many organizations, and there are better ways of scoring than simply picking a project out of a hat. Another key point with projects is that they must be aligned with the organization's strategic plan. So if the strategic plan says that this year our company is going to accomplish A, B, and C, odds are there's going to be a project to accomplish A, B, and C. Or as far down as the resources go at any rate. Another part of selecting projects is that some are riskier and some have a higher impact than others do on the organization. And because of that, those are elements that you need to take into account when you're selecting which projects to go forward with. In terms of constraints, those are limits on the options available to the project or to the project team. And feasibility studies are often a kind of study that looks through and says, if we went ahead and did this project, what would our likely results be? And is this something that we can do? There are many key roles in initiation. The people who have influence over the project or are impacted by the project are called stakeholders. And if you look at the list of project stakeholders, there are many, and it's actually very important to understand what each one of those roles is and how they apply to the project, because as you go through in your team project, you will be evaluating the stakeholders, identifying and then evaluating the stakeholders for your project. The project sponsor is one of your most important stakeholders. Sponsors actually provide funding and resources for projects. Another thing about stakeholders is that they have edgy haircuts and look very serious. No, that's just this particular picture. But generally, stakeholders all have competing needs, and they need to be in agreement with the goals and the impacts of the project. But one of the key elements or responsibilities of the project manager is to help understand what those needs are and help bring those competing needs into alignment. One of the key documents from the project is the project charter. This is, as we say, just a document, often very short. It might be only 2 or 3 pages. In other organizations, it might be 100 pages long. But it really depends on how organizations use the project charter. There are several purposes for the project charter. It does allocate resources or commit resources to the project. And it helps to get everyone into the same understanding. The project charter actually is where the project manager must be appointed to the project, because now that it's going forward, someone has to pick up the planning, and that would be the project manager. And it provides an overview of the project. Project charters are often written externally to the project. They might be written by organizations who want to have them done, or different parts in the organization. And there are many, there's a list in this chapter of the essential elements of the project charter. As you go through and write the elements for your particular team project, you'll want to come back to these pages and look at what is so important about each one of these elements, so that when you write your project charter, you'll be able to capture effectively and apply these purposes to your project. Project charters need to be signed off in order to be official, and there are hundreds of project charters that are created and never get signed off, and the project never gets the go-ahead. If a project does get signed off, one of the next steps is a project kickoff meeting. And it's helpful to have an agenda. Heldman goes through some very specific agenda items for a project charter. Finally, at the end of Chapter 3, we have some key elements of terminology and some review questions. Thank you, and I will see you in Chapter 4.